Namaskar. Welcome back to once again to the Board of Open Schooling and Skill Education, Sikkim, and the subject is going to be social science, secondary class, and secondary class and social science. And the unit is going to be Module 1, Session 6, India and the World Through the Ages. And today I'm going to discuss with you the second part of Modern World Second, which I had left with you incomplete, and I thought that I will redo it with you, some of it with you once again, so that it is recapitulation for all of us. Now, after completing this lesson we read earlier, you will be able to describe the Industrial Revolution, discuss the innovations and technological changes brought in by the Industrial Revolution, assess the impact of the Industrial Revolution on society, identify the factors responsible for the rise of imperialism and colonialism, discuss the various stages of development of imperialism in Asia and Africa. Now, in this particular unit now, which I'm going to discuss with you, it is going to be tracing the events which led to the two world wars and also list the objectives of the UN organization, United Nations organization. So I'll come to the impact of imperialism. Now, the negative impact of imperialism outweighs its positive ones as it drained both the Asian and African countries of their wealth, their raw materials, and exploited their markets by selling their industrial goods, thereby destroying the economy of these colonies. Their policy of racial discrimination made the people lose their self-respect as well as their confidence. You will read more about it in the next few lessons on India, because we are going to take up our country as a study point. In India, the Europeans came as traders but became rulers. They destroyed a prosperous economy. India, which was an exporter of textiles, became a buyer of finished goods and exporter of raw materials. Besides, heavy taxation led to the poverty of the masses. Now, before I go on further, we talked about imperialism, which had disastrous effects on the colonies. Now, the indigenous industries were ruined. We all know that. And their natural resources ruthlessly exploited. China was divided into spheres of influence and thrown open to international trade to everyone. The whole of Africa, except for Liberia and Ethiopia, was divided among the European nations. A large number of Africans were sold as slaves. In South Africa, the white European community ill-treated the black on the basis of their dark skins. From Africa, they were taken to the colonies in America. And you know what was happening? They had to go in ships, which was a very long distance under very inhuman circumstances. And many of them would die. And many of them were sick when they landed on the coast of Africa. And the few which survived were ill-treated. This is called racial discrimination or apartheid, which was the worst impact of imperialism. The negative impact of imperialism outweighs its positive one, as we discussed, as I talked to you earlier in the points, as it drained both the Asian and African colonies of their wealth. What in India, the Europeans came as traders. Initially, they came to trade. Trade what? Spices. Because the Portuguese were carrying back a lot of spices, and which they had purchased in India at very cheap rates, and they were selling it in their own countries at expensive rates. Maybe it is believed that it could be 100 times more than what they had got in India, because these spices were needed, because these countries were cold and there were no refrigerators. So what these people would do was they would treat their the animals for food, their mutton for food, with these spices and put them in the snow. They destroyed a prosperous economy. India, which was an exporter of textile industries, textile industry was very good in India. But now what has happened? It soon became a buyer of goods from outside, the textile goods from England. India, which was an exporter, became a buyer of finished goods and exporter of raw materials. Besides, heavy taxation led to poverty of the masses. Now, the 20th century saw more scientific discoveries and inventions than any other period in the human history. Starting with the steam powered ships, it ended with human visit to space, moon landings, and of course, the network of computers. The whole world shrunk with instant communications and speedy transport. Unfortunately, the whole world was affected by the imperialist rivalries and economic motive. This created tension among European countries, US and Japan, which entangled them into two world wars, about which you will now read in the coming units. Because of the tension, war now started. Now, industrialization, colonialism, and imperialism created intense rivalry among the European nations over their possession of colonies in Asia and Africa. This competition became more acute by the end of the 19th century when colonies were no longer available in Asia and Africa. Compromise was not possible due to mutual distrust and hostilities, and in 1914, a war in Europe, which soon engulfed the entire world, started. It involved all the major countries of the world and their colonies. The damage caused by this war had no precedent in history. For the first time in history, all the resources of the warring states were mobilized. It involved their army, their navy, their air force. The civilian population suffered tremendous casualties also because of indiscriminate bombing. Since the war was spread over a large part of the world, for the first time it is known as the First World War. It marked a turning point in world history. It was not a sudden occurrence, but the culmination of a large number of forces and developments covering a long period before 1914. Now, what were the causes of the First World War? System of alliances, imperialist rivalries among the different nations like England, France, Germany, Italy, and others were a major cause of the war. Earlier, wars were averted because possibilities of acquiring more colonies was still there. But the situation had now changed. Most of Asia and Africa had already been divided up, and possibilities of further expansion was not there. It was possible only by dispossessing some imperialist country of their colony, their colony. This division of colonies created conditions of war. In the last quarter of the 19th century, Germany had made tremendous economic and industrial progress and left England and France far behind in industrial production. She needed colonies as much as Britain to fulfill her economic needs. Now, in the imperial race, Germany became the main competitor for Great Britain. In British naval supremacy was also challenged when Germany built the largest warship, Imperator, and built the Kiel Canal connecting the North Sea and the Baltic Sea, endangering the English coast line. Germany also became a railway line connecting Berlin with Baghdad, which made it easier for Germany to send troops or supplies to the east, but it posed a threat to British colonies there. Like Germany, all major powers of Europe and Japan also had their imperialistic ambitions. Italy was there because her unification was done. She also wanted colonies. Japan, because of the militarization of Japan, they too needed colonies. France wanted to add Morocco to her conquest, to a conquest in Africa, while Russia had her ambitions in Iran. Japan had her ambitions in the Far East, where she was able to extend her influence over the Russo-Japanese after the Russo-Japanese War of 1905. Austria had her ambitions in the Ottoman Empire, while the US was slowly emerging as a powerful nation. Her main interest was to preserve the independence of trade as it was increasing at a fast pace. The expansion of influence of any great power was posing a major threat to the to world peace. Now, what was system of alliances? Conflicts and confrontations for more colonies prompted the imperialist powers to look for allies. For example, in 1882, Germany, Austria, and Italy signed the Triple Alliance, while England, Russia, and France signed the Triple Entente. Emergence of two mutually opposed groups divided Europe into hostile groups. These countries competed with one another in producing deadly weapons, which led to a race for armaments. Now, mutual hatred, suspicion disturbed the atmosphere of this was disturbed the atmosphere of peace. The propaganda which was created made it clear that if war broke out, the whole of Europe would be drawn into it. And now came the pan-Slav movement and the Balkan politics. I had discussed with you till here. Now I'm going to talk about pan-Slav movement and the Balkan politics. The Balkan region of Eastern Europe consisted of many states such as Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Montenegro, and many other smaller states. Originally, these states were under the control of the Ottoman Emperor or the ruler of Turkey. Now, the beginning of the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire began to decline. European powers, including Austria and Russia, rushed for obtaining a foothold in the region. The matter got complicated with the resurgence of nationalism among the people in most of these states. These were called Slavs. Since they were scattered in many of the East European states, they started a national movement called the Pan-Slav movement. Pan-Slav means all Slav movement. Their main demand was to unite the Slavs in one state under Siberia, the state which had the largest Slav population in the world. Now, Serbia was supported by Russia, whereas Austria opposed Serbia and the nationalist movement. This resulted in rivalry between Russia and Austria. Now, Austria did not want a strong Serbian state which would hamper her ambitions of expansion. In 1908, Austria annexed two Slav states, Bosnia and Herzegovina, leading to hostility between Serbia and Austria. Between 1912 and 1914, four Balkan states fought two wars against the Ottoman Emperor for independence. Turkey was defeated and lost all her possessions in Europe. Austria hurriedly set up an independent state of Albania against the Serbian ambition of Greater Serbia. Hostility mounted between Austria on one side and Serbia and Russia on the other side. As you can see, by 1914, the atmosphere in Europe was explosive. Against this background, Archduke Francis Ferdinand, the heir to the Austrian throne, went to Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, on a state visit. As he was getting down from the car, he was assassinated by a Serbian youth on 20th June 1914. The murder of Archduke Francis Ferdinand became the immediate cause of the war, and Austria had Serbia responsible for the assassination of their prince and served her with an ultimatum with various conditions. Now, assured of Russian help, Serbia refused to accept the ultimatum and started mobilizing her troops on the border. On 20th June 1914, Austria declared war on Serbia. On 1st August 1914, Germany declared war on Russia. And on 3rd August 1914, Germany declared war on France. As German troops entered Belgium, England declared war on Germany on 4th of August 1914. Thus, a minor incident in Europe soon triggered the war, with all the countries joining in, which soon took the shape of the First World War. Now I'm going to talk to you about the course of the war. The World War I, which started in August 1914, continued till November 1918. During this period, many important battles were fought, such as the Battle of Marne in 1914, battles of Verdun, Battle of Somme, and Battle of Jutland in 1916. This year, 1917, saw two important developments. One was the entry of US into the war in April, and second was the withdrawal of Russian from the war in November. Now, in 1915, a British passenger ship, Lusitania was sunk by German U-boats, killing 128 passengers who were traveling in the ship. The U.S. Senate took a very serious view of this because these civilians were people from the civilian nation nationally were from United States. They were United States civilians. Besides becoming a powerful nation, Germany would pose a threat to U.S. supremacy. Moreover, the US being the major supplier of arms and ammunition, the continuation of war would result in economic disadvantage for the US. Keeping all these in view, she decided to join the war in 1917. Now, do you remember reading about the October Revolution of 1917 in Russia? One of the main demands of the revolutionaries were peace. So immediately after the revolution, under the leadership of Lenin, Russia withdrew from the war, which and signed a peace treaty with Germany in 1918. After the revolution in Russia, the communist revolution in 1917, Russia withdrew from the war because the imperialist ambitions were of the Tsar, and the Marxists thought that if the war continued, for these people, for the imperialist ambitions, they would all be killed. They did not want it because they had a different ideology from the imperialist rivalries. So by July 1918, Germany began to collapse. Bulgaria and Turkey surrendered in September and October respectively. On 3rd November 1918, the Austrian Emperor surrendered due to widespread unrest in Austria. After similar revolts by the German people, German Emperor William II fled to Holland and Germany was proclaimed a republic. The new government signed an armistice on 11th November 1918, bringing an end to the First World War. Now, in the course of the war, many new weapons such as machine guns, poison gas, liquid fire, submarine, and tanks were used. New strategies and military techniques were experimented by both sides. England used naval and economic blockade, tanks, and air raids. The French used water trench warfare, and Germany used U-boats and submarines to sink ships under the sea. Now, the immediate consequence of the war, I told you, was disastrous and frightening events the world had witnessed. The immediate consequences: a million people, including innocent civilians, lost their lives. There was a large-scale damage of property, and in most of the European countries, the total expenditure was expected to be at a staggering figure of $180 billion. The economy of most of the countries was shattered, resulting in social tension, unemployment, and poverty. Now, at the end of it all, what had happened? Disaster. Obviously, war always brings disaster and loss and tremendous loss of men, money, and property. Between January and June 1919, the Allied powers met at a conference in the Palace of Versailles, Paris to decide the future of the defeated powers. Though the representatives of nearly 27 countries attended the conference, the decisions were taken by heads of state of Britain, France, and US, and they left out the defeated Germany and Italy. Russia was excluded, and the defeated powers were not allowed to attend. The Allies signed different treaties with the defeated powers. The most important of them was Treaty of Versailles signed by Germany, and the Treaty of Saint-Germain with Austria, and the Treaty of Sèvres with Turkey. Now, the Treaty of Versailles was very important. Shattered Germany politically, economically, and militarily. Germany was held guilty of aggression and was asked to pay a huge amount of money as compensation for the war. Now, destruction had been caused by France and England and USA, but they were not asked to pay any compensation. This was forced on the people of Italy and Germany, especially Germany. Alsace and Lorraine, which were taken from France in 1871, were to be returned to France. Rhineland, the land between France and Germany, was demilitarized and brought under the control of the Allied powers. The gold-rich Saar Valley was given to France for 15 years. Now, Saar Valley was in Germany, and it is given to France for 15 years. Now, you can imagine that any further progress of industries in Germany would come to a stand. So Germany was not going to like it. Germany army was disbanded. Ships were sunk and the army was restricted to 1 million soldiers only. Germany was destroyed, deprived of all her colonies. Much of her territories in Europe were given to Belgium and Poland. Now, the Treaty of Saint Germain separated Hungary from Austria and Hungary. That means Austria and Hungary were now divided, Austria one and Hungary another. Austria had to recognize the independence of Hungary because she had become an independent state and had to give part of her territories to Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia. The Treaty of Sevres brought up the Ottoman Empire. It broke up the Ottoman Empire. Some of its states were given to the Allied powers as mandates. For example, Palestine and Mesopotamia were given to Britain and Syria to France. The Allied powers were to look after these colonies till they became self-reliant. The war and the peace treaties The war and the peace treaties transformed the political map of the world, particularly Europe. After the October Revolution in Russia, the ruling dynasty of the Romanovs was overthrown. Now you can understand why the political map of the world of Europe changed, because countries were divided, like Austria-Hungary. Hungary was made independent, and so on. And by the end of the war, Hohenzollern dynasty of Germany and Habsburg dynasty of Austria were removed and republic governments were set up. Monarchy was also abolished in Turkey after revolution in 1922. The two new states, Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, were created out of the territories taken away from the defeated powers. That is from the then Hungary emerged as an independent state. Baltic states such as Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Finland were made independent states. The states of Romania and Poland were enlarged in size. All this changed the boundaries of most of the states of Europe. It was evident that the peace settlements were dictated and unequal settlements, which were imposed upon the defeated powers. They had no say in the deliberation. The end of the war saw the end of European supremacy and emergence of USSR and USA as a major powers. The period also saw the strengthening of national movements in the countries of Asia and Africa. Even before the war ended, in November 1918, the US President Woodrow Wilson had proposed a peace program known as Wilson's 14 points. The most important point was the proposal for the establishment of an international organization maintaining peace and security on the world. On the basis of this proposal, the League of Nations was set up in 1920. Now we will talk about the League of Nations, which was formed in the 14 points of President Woodrow Wilson. The League was the first international organization set up in 1920 with its headquarters at Geneva. Its main aim was to maintain peace and security in the world, prevent future war, promote international cooperation, settle international disputes peacefully, and improve the condition of laborers in member countries. But unfortunately, the League failed to prevent war and conflict for which it was set up. When Italy attacked Ethiopia in 1935 and Japan attacked Manchuria in 1936, the League could do nothing. The League was made, but no powers were given to the League. Also, mutual rivalries among nations for the possession of colonies continued, exposing their imperialistic ambitions. See, in 1918 the war ended, but when did India gain independence? In 1947. So, the world between the two world wars. Now, the period of 20 years between the two world wars experienced tremendous changes. There were positive developments like national awakening in countries of Asia and Africa and popularity of socialist movement in the Soviet Union and in other countries. The world also saw the worst form of dictatorship in many countries of Europe, especially in Italy and Germany. Remember, in Italy, we had the we had Mussolini, and in Germany we had Hitler. A major economic crisis took place which affected almost every part of the world, particularly the most advanced countries of the West. The period also witnessed the worst economic depression in USA in 1929. There was more production and less consumption, which affected the economy of the entire world. And now we can talk about the causes for the growth of fascism and Nazism and development in other parts of the world. After the war, a number of movements arose in Europe. And now we're talking about growth of fascism and Nazism. After the war, a number of political movements arose in Europe, which was given the name fascism. They had a number of features which were common, that is, hostility to democracy and socialism, and the aim to establish dictatorship. They were supported by the rulers, the upper class aristocrats, and the capitalists because they promised to save them from the danger of socialism. They let loose a systematic campaign of terrorism and murder, which the government showed little interest in curbing. Now, the dictatorship introduced in Italy by Mussolini is referred to as fascism, and the term is derived from the Latin word fasces, which stood for symbols of authority. In 1922, Mussolini came to power with the support of the Italian king and ruled like a dictator from 1925 to 1943. Mussolini banned all political parties and introduced some reforms to get the support of the people. The arrogance of Victorian powers, the inability of the existing governments to cope up with the post-war problems, the helplessness of the League of Nations, and failure of democratic forces to check fascism made the rise of dictatorship possible. The German version of fascism is known as Nazism. It was established by Adolf Hitler, and he promised to reverse post-war settlements and restore German power and glory. Remember I told you? Germany was supposed to disarm itself, demilitarization of the Rhineland had taken place, then Germany was forced to make reparations for the losses that had occurred in the war, whereas other states were not made to go through, like this, neither Italy, neither England nor France. So people were very unhappy, very dissatisfied, and they felt very humiliated. So what did Germany do? His vision of rebuilding Germany into a great nation inspired many Germans because he had promised them, he had showed them a new world that he would get even with these people. Most Germans to join them. It acted like a balm on the wounds caused by the humiliation after the World War. Many people supported Nazism because it seemed to offer a way out of economic decline. The success of the Nazis proved disastrous not only for the German people, but for the entire Europe and many other parts of the world. It led to dictatorship being established in Hungary, Romania, Portugal, and Spain. The growth of anti-democratic governments in so many countries led to the Second World War. Now let's see what are the other developments that took place in the other parts of the world. Now, England and France too had to face severe economic crisis, scarcity, and unemployment, but they continued with their democratic governments. Despite worker strikes and other disturbances in England, the problems were sought to be solved by forming a coalition government consisting of Labour, Liberal, and the Conservative parties in 1931. And in France, a popular front government consisting of the left-wing parties was set up in 1936. Now, Soviet Union emerged as the first socialist state of the world. Under the new government, socialist principles were introduced in economy, and it was the only country to remain unaffected, while all the Western capitalist countries suffered due to the economic depression in 1929. Though USA participated in the First World War, the country did not suffer much material loss. Industrial prosperity, political stability, and economic growth made it a superpower. So two countries emerged as superpowers, US and USSR. However, she suffered the worst economic crisis in 1929 due to overproduction. Prices of commodities declined, leading to the fall in share prices. The banks closed down and people lost their lifelong earnings. The loan which USA had given to the European countries after Second World War, after First World War, sorry, I'm so sorry, after the First World War had to be withdrawn. It resulted in economic instability in the European countries too. The new government that came to power in USA under Franklin Roosevelt introduced a program of economic recovery called the New Deal. Under this, many reforms were introduced, such as creating new employment opportunities, giving help to the farmers, and also giving help to the farmers. Now, Japan was the only country in Asia which emerged as an imperialist country. You have already read it defeated Russia in 1905. Now, during the period between the two world wars, Japan became a strong military power and supported fascism. She signed the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo Axis, which they were the fascist power. She also signed the Anti-Comintern Pact to check the spread of communism along with Germany and Italy, indicating their hostility to the Soviet Union. Now we come to the other war, which we call the World War II. Now we are going to read about the causes of the Second World War and consequences of the war. Very important consequences. It was a disastrous war in which lost many lives. Millions of people died. Property was destroyed. Unemployment was there. Food production was finished because obviously the people are involved in war. The industries were involved in creating goods for the armed forces of a war. So where was the production? It was bad. So the World War started in September 1939. Then the Second World War, like the earlier war, started in Europe and assumed the character of a world war. The fascist countries wanted to redivide the world for imperialist gains and thus came into conflict with the established power. We know that Germany was politically, militarily, and economically shattered by the Treaty of Versailles. She sought revenge and was ready to have a trial of strength with the Allied powers. She sought revenge and was given to have a trial of strength with the Allied powers. The position of Italy was no better. Though Italy joined the Allied powers during the First World War, with the hope of imperial gain, she did not gain any colonies after the war. She lost nearly 600,000 people during the war. Both the fascist and Nazi parties glorified war and promised the people that they would bring back the lost glory of their countries after the First World War. Remember Treaty of Versailles, Treaty of Saint Germain, and so on. They began to follow an aggressive policy of expansion through conquest. Germany annexed Rhineland in 1936, Austria in 1938, and Czechoslovakia in 1938, while Italy attacked Ethiopia. This resulted in social tension and conflicts among the European nations. Now, you have already read about the rise of Japan as a military power. Remember, I told you about the militarization of Japan and how now it's also entered into the rush for getting hold of colonies. And then they made the Rome, Berlin, Tokyo axis with the fascist powers. By signing the Rome, Berlin, Tokyo axis, these three powers committed themselves to supporting each other. Japan was given a free hand to expand control in Asia, and the region of the Pacific with Germany and Italy would have a free hand in Europe, obviously. Now Japan is towards the Asian countries, and Germany and Italy would have free hand in Europe. Now the success of the Soviet Union alarmed the Western powers. Why? Because they were capitalist countries and Russia was a communist country. Being capitalist countries, they wanted to check the spread of communism. So they adopted a systematic policy of favoring Italy and Germany, who were anti-communist. This policy is referred to as the appeasement policy. See, Italy and Germany were not talking about communism, whereas Russia was. And all of these people feared Russia. It was a giant power. So what would happen now? If you see even the war of Ukraine in Russia, what is happening now? Though Russia is one of the independent states because it had dismantled itself earlier. Now, but still, it continues to hold a lot of importance in the world. So this policy, now England and France, what did they do? England, especially England, now she wanted the support of Germany against the powers of the communist powers. So Germany army, which was restricted to 1,000 soldiers, 100,000 soldiers after World War One, increased the strength to 800,000. See, 1 into 8. Without any protest of the Western powers. Earlier, they had restricted themselves that we will have only 100,000 soldiers, but now it is 800,000. Even when Hitler put aside the Treaty of Versailles and annexed Rhineland and Austria, the Western powers remained silent. See how Germany is moving up. First, she increases our army, then she catches hold of the Rhineland and Austria, Rhineland and Austria, and annexed Rhineland and Austria. In 1930s, and there was no objection from any of the Allied powers. In 1937, civil war began in space between the popularly elected government and the fascist leader under General Franco. Hitler supplied arms and ammunition to overthrow the democratically elected government in Spain. Italy gave them the help. The Soviet Union appealed to England for collective action against General Franco. When the whole world sent support to the existing government, England and France did not take any action. They wanted to keep away they only wanted to safeguard their own colonies. They were not interested in what was happening outside. Only when their own territories were being disturbed by these Axis powers, then they would take action. They were not bothered. This appeasement policy reached its climax when Hitler invited the Prime Minister of Britain and France to Munich in August 1938. The Munich Pact was signed by them in 1938, allowing Germany to annex Sudetenland in the northern part of Czechoslovakia. Later, the whole of Czechs was annexed. The policy of appeasement strengthened the fascist powers. Now they were going doing anything they liked with abandon for the very simple reason. England and France were scared of the communist power of Russia. They did not want these communists moving towards their countries. But they also knew that if they had supported Germany and Italy, they would be better off. And especially Germany. France was scared of Germany, but not England. So it was now clear that Britain and France wanted Germany and Italy to act against the Soviet Union. To stall these plans, Soviet Union signed a pact with Germany by which both agreed not to attack one another. This gave her some time to prepare for future confrontation while Germany obtained the neutrality of the Soviet Union. The scene was set for Second World War when Germany attacked Poland on the 1st of September 1939. Britain declared war on Germany on 3rd September 1939. So, see what is happening. They were appeasing Italy and Germany. Why? The policy of appeasement was why? Because they wanted Germany and Italy to act against the Soviet Union, because these countries were against the communists in the Soviet Union. So they wanted their help. So what did they do? They allowed them to continue unabated, occupying territories, breaking of the conventions of the Treaty of Versailles, Treaty of Saint-Germain. They were not the least bothered. So to stall these plans, the Soviet Union went and signed a pact with Germany by which both agreed not to attack one another. See? They signed a pact with Germany so that they would not attack each other. This gave her some time to prepare for future confrontation while Germany obtained the neutrality of the Soviet Union. That means Russia signs the treaty with Germany that they would not attack, they would remain together. Soviet Union was happy because it would give time for her to rearm herself also properly. And number two, she also made sure that Germany did not fight against her when the war started. Because and Germany also obtained the neutrality of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union would not attack Germany and vice versa. The scene was set for World War II when Germany attacked Poland on 1st of September. Britain declared war on Germany on 3rd September 1939. Now, what are the consequences of the war? Excuse me. The war came to an end in September 1945. This was the most destructive war in human history. It caused unprecedented loss of life, property, and resources. Big buildings were razed to the ground, and thousands of people were uprooted from their homelands. The German Jews were either exterminated or sent to concentration camps. Now, I would like you, if you please do have take out time, go to the YouTube and see these war movies, the Second World War movies, how the Germans treated the Jews and the concentration camps. You can just write concentration camps of Nazis for Jews. The German Jews were either exterminated or sent to concentration camps. The Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were almost wiped off when atomic bombs were dropped on them. Even today, those who survived the Second World War Holocaust, those who were children, are still suffering from various disabilities. The danger of nuclear holocaust was of major consequences of one of the major consequences of the war. Germany was divided into 4 zones, each under the control of one of the victorious powers. The Nazi Party was banned and the German army disabled. Germany was placed under US supervision. In 1949, when monarchy was established, United States troops were withdrawn. Now, imperialism weakened with US and Soviet Union emerging as superpowers. Both imperialism weakened with USA and the rise of then the Soviet Union emerging as strong powers. Rather, we should call them the superpowers. The world was now divided in 2 major blocks, the communist bloc and the capitalist bloc, headed by the US. The tension and unarmed conflict that developed between these 2 blocs started the Cold War, which continued for a very long time. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Let me finish off. A major impact of the war was the foundation of the UN, about which you are going to be reading in the next section. The world has since then undergone many changes. Its political map has changed. A large number of nations, Asia and Africa, who had suffered under colonial rule, are now independent. Together, they are now a major force in the world, especially our country, India. The world has seen, I see there's an activity over here. The world has seen devastating world wars and continues to witness conflicts and struggles even today. Enlist at least 5 problems which come in the way of world peace. Suggest ways to address these issues and see how you as an individual can contribute to make the world a better place to live in. Now, we come to the UNO, foundation of the UN organization. The horrors of the war made the world leaders to realize the need for an international organization for peace. World leaders such as British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, Soviet leader Stalin, and US President Roosevelt met at various conferences to decide about the formation of this organization. Finally, on 24th October 1945, at a conference in San Francisco, the UN Charter was adopted by the members of 50 nations and the United Nations organization was formed. Since then, 24th October is celebrated every year in UN as UN Day all over the world. The UNO is based on the principle of sovereignty and equality of all nations. The main aims of the UN are to maintain peace and security in the world, to prevent future war, to solve international disputes peacefully, and to promote international cooperation. Now, foundation of UN organization and objectives of UN, the UNO, like the League of Nations, which was established after the First World War. The UN too had a major objective of maintaining international peace and security. It also had another major objective to develop friendly relations among nations on the basis of equality and achieve international cooperation in solving economic, social, cultural, and humanitarian problems. Now, to promote human rights and fundamental freedom for the people of the world was one of the aims of the UN, to promote human rights and fundamental freedom for the free people of the world was one of the major aims of the UN. It was also to act as a common platform for harmonizing the activities of various nations for the attainment of the major objectives of the United Nations. Now, okay, first I finish off and then I'll deal with the questions. And if you have any problems, please refer back to me. I will try and answer them as fast and as smoothly as I can so that you can understand and do well in your examinations. So, the new wave of colonization, what you have learned in this entire lesson, the new wave of colonization known as new imperialism in the last quarter of the 19th century. Then you read about the main factors behind colonial expansion were the needs created by the Industrial Revolution. Now, Industrial Revolution, understand, means of food production or any industrial production with the help of machines. And obviously, as I told you, and I'm again repeating it, that if you have, with the help of machines, you could manufacture things much more faster and much more cheaper. Now, if the things are going to be at a fast pace, then obviously you need a lot of raw materials. And where will these raw materials come from? Places where there are no industrial, where there is no industrial revolution. Countries like states like in Asia and Africa, especially like places like India. Then the growth of transport and communication was also there. Then desire for power, extreme nationalism, and an urge to civilize human beings. Now, this goes to show that we in India were not a humanized or civilized people. Were we not civilized? We had literature, we had everything in our country, and people were education, and people were civilized. But the ruling power, the English British, they wanted to conquer us by telling us that we were barbarians. We were not civilized people. So they had come over here in our country to civilize us. And they did with every other country of the world, especially of Asia and Africa. Now, Japan was the only Asian country to rise as an imperialist power. How? Japan was fast. What did it do? It militarized itself and soon became a very strong power. And it was able to rise against the imperialist powers of the West and to herself become an imperialist authority. The intense imperialist rivalry among European countries and formation of military alliances resulted in the outbreak of the First World War. Now, what is this? Intense imperialist rivalry. England and France had lots of colonies. They had already started on their discovery of finding out where they all could establish their own empires and trade, whereas Italy and Germany were divided into very small states. Okay, Lombardy and Venice, and then under Cavour and Garibaldi and Mazzini, they were made into a one state called Italy, and then in Germany you had Munich and all these Berlin and all these under the guidance of Otto von Bismarck. They soon also became big powers and then started the imperialist rivalries. Bismarck said, "Give me blood," you know, and I will make you a very strong state. And then you could fight with the other European countries of the West, and resulted in the outbreak of World War, because they too, Germany and Italy, also entered into the search for, rather loot for colonies, which did not agree with the with England and France. They did not want competitions. And these people knew that if they really had to get these colonies, they will have to fight the British and the French. The consequences of the war included harsh and humiliating treatment to Germany in the form of signing of the Treaty of Versailles, defeated powers losing their colonies, major territorial changes in Europe taking place. Like, for example, as I told you, Austria and Hungary were broken up, and so was the Ottoman Empire. And breaking up of the Ottoman Empire, independence of Italy, Hungary, and setting up of the League of Nations. Now, soon after the First World War was over, growth of fascism in Italy, led by Mussolini, and Nazism in Germany, led by Hitler, suppressed democracy, freedom, socialism, and communism between 1919 to 1939. That is between between the two world wars. That is after the end of the First World War and the start of the Second World War. The policy of appeasement of the Western powers towards Germany and Italy led to the outbreak of World War II. Then formation of the UN, division of Germany, weakening of imperialist powers, and the emergence of independent states in Asia and Africa were some of the consequences of World War II. The post-war situation witnessed the emergence of two superpowers, USA and Soviet Union. They are still very powerful. The war ended in 1930. It started in 1939 and ended in 1945. But see, from that time, 45 to 24, even today, these two countries are still very powerful. And the beginning of a bitter Cold War between the two military power blocks. Even now, our country is equally powerful. And to the I'm sure, to the utter fright and disgust of the US and the Soviet Union. United Nations Organization, or why should I say US and the Soviet Union? I think the entire world. UN organizations were formed for peace. Organization was formed for peace and harmony in the world at the end. So, now this brings me to the end of the lesson. It took me 2 lessons to finish this one huge lesson. So you can imagine what you have learned over here: imperialist rivalries, desire for colonies, then formation of alliances, and all these led to the First World War. And then the war ended, and then what happened? Treaties were signed by England and Germany, but they did not allow the defeated countries of Japan, Germany, and Italy to join the treaty organization. And Germany was heaped with many inequalities, like she could not increase her army, she could not make arms and armaments, she could not train her soldiers. All these things were taking place. But the moment Russia became a communist country after the 1917 Russian Revolution, England and France were very frightened of the communists, and they wanted to do something to keep the Russians away from the center. So what did they do? They let Germany and do many things which ultimately ruined the world again. And that was, they could let them militarize from 100,000 to 800,000. Was the demilitarization of Rhine Valley was finished, and the army moved into the Rhine Valley, and arms and armaments were there. They were suppressing the people. The Jews were suppressed and sent to the concentration camps. All these treaties, all these situations, and along with that, even Mussolini was on the same pattern. And result was the World War started all over again. And then Germany enters into an alliance with Russia, Russia enters into an alliance with Germany, both of them trying to keep the other away from the war, because they realized that Russia was a powerful country. Then along with this, in 1929 came the economic depression, where production was much more than the use consumption. As a result, what happened? They had the depression caused severe uh, losses for human beings in terms of men and money and even factories. Now I come to the end of this lesson. Now, before I do say, I want to tell you one thing, that many questions can be asked, and small questions can be asked, long-term questions can be asked also. Like for example, I'll read out some of them, and sometimes the questions might not be directly picked up from this terminal exercises, but yes, similar questions can be made. Like for example, how the inventions in the textile industry revolutionized the production of cotton cloth. Then, what were the various factors, political, economic, and geographical and technological, which contributed to industrialization in England? Then, state both the advantages and the disadvantages in the society with the coming of the Industrial Revolution. Advantages, work would be done faster. Disadvantages, cotton industries came to an end, and now factors of production, that is men, money, and space, were now shifted from the home of the workers to the factory, which was maybe in the town, and people were now paid lower wages and work in unhealthy situations. Why, why did the industrial countries start fighting amongst themselves for the control of the areas when industrial revolution had not taken place? What made Japan join the race for colonies? Obviously, her militarization policy. And she too wanted to join these big European countries to increase her power and strength. Then mention both the positive and the negative effects of imperialism on the colonies, examine the consequences of the First World War, similarly examine the consequences of the Second World War. Now, how did the appeasement policy by the Western powers led to the rise of fascism in Italy and Nazism in Germany? Then describes the course of events during the Second World War and the First World War. What are the main objectives of the UNO? Mark the following places on the given map of the world. Of course, this map for question will not be asked by you, so you can do without it. But please do make it a point to open the atlas and find out where these places are. Now, there are also in-text questions, small in-text questions. Name at least 4 Balkan states. Which countries form the Triple Entente? Which countries form the Triple Entente? England, France, and Russia. Give at least 3 causes of the First World War. You know what? The system of alliances, industrial rivalries, and so on. Now, name 2 countries which adopted dictatorial governments after 1920. What was the main cause of the Great Depression of 1929? Main cause? Overproduction. When and where the UN was formally constituted. Now, at the end of each lesson, they have been given answers to the in-text questions. Supposing you answer a question, and you must be able to do it, because that's the way to get marks. 40 marks, I think 30 or 40, I'm not very sure. I'll find out and let you know. Questions are objective type questions. And if you are able to do, at least you get 30 marks. So do these small questions. It is a must. And even when you are reading, for example, the main cause of the World War, rise of Germany as an industrial nation, led to its growing need for raw materials. Hence, imperialist rivalry for colonies began with England and France. Small short answers can also be asked. They are of 3 marks each. And if you are able to go through them, this will be able to help you achieve very good percentage in your examination. And I'm sure the interesting part of it would be that you would try and get into the class 12 and take up history. So that brings me to an end to this particular lesson, and I hope you found the lesson interesting. And if you have any problems, you don't understand something, please do get back and in the next class, and I hope I'll be able to help you. The next class is going to be day after tomorrow, that is on the 26th. Thank you. All the best. Vande Mataram.